Daniel had always dreamed of stepping foot on a world no human had ever seen before. The stars had called to him ever since he was a boy, and now, as a young explorer representing humanity's interstellar research division, he found himself on the strange and breathtaking planet of Karith. From orbit, the surface had looked like a patchwork of silver deserts and deep green forests, with massive crystal formations stretching higher than any human skyscraper. It was beautiful, but Daniel knew beauty in the galaxy often hid danger. His shuttle landed quietly on a flat plain near the edge of a towering forest. The air was breathable, though heavy with strange scents, metallic and sharp, as if the ground itself bled minerals. Daniel adjusted his gear, checked his wrist scanner, and began to walk cautiously toward the forest's edge. His mission was simple: collect samples, take readings, and report back. But simplicity rarely survived first contact. The locals were called the Veyari. Every report Daniel had read painted them as terrifying. They were said to be armored giants, ruthless in battle and quick to destroy any outsider who stepped onto their land. Other species gave them wide space in trade routes, and entire star systems bent under their authority. Humans, being relatively new to the galactic stage, had never encountered them directly. Daniel knew he was trespassing into their world, and yet curiosity and duty had pushed him here. The forest was eerily silent. No birds, no insects, no rustle of wind. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine as he stepped deeper among the giant trees, each trunk glowing faintly with veins of blue light. He collected soil samples, scanned the strange flora, and forced himself to focus on the task. But as he crouched to examine a plant, his wrist scanner began to pulse with warning signals. Heat signatures surrounded him. Daniel froze. He slowly turned his head and saw shadows moving between the trees. Tall figures, their bodies gleaming under natural armor, stepped forward one by one. They were larger than any human he had ever seen, standing nearly twice his height, with sharp ridges across their shoulders and helmets that seemed to grow naturally from their skulls. Spears of black metal glowed faintly in their hands. His heart pounded. The Veyari. One of them shouted in a deep guttural voice that his translator struggled to keep up with, "Outsider, you stand on sacred ground." Daniel raised his hands slowly, trying to show he meant no harm. I'm here in peace. I only came to study." His voice shook despite his best effort. The Veyari tightened their circle. Their presence pressed down on him like a heavy weight. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. His shuttle was far behind him, and these warriors were faster, stronger, and armed. He had heard tales that a single Veyari could crush a steel barrier with one strike. Then the circle parted. A new figure walked forward with calm steps. She was taller than the rest, her armor decorated with silver markings that glowed faintly in the twilight. Her face was partly uncovered, showing high, sharp features, and eyes that glowed like molten amber. The warriors bowed their heads as she approached, and Daniel realized who she must be, their queen. She studied him silently for a long moment. Daniel felt her gaze pierce straight through him. He tried to hold steady, but his knees trembled slightly. She noticed. A faint, almost curious expression crossed her face. Finally, she spoke in a clear voice that the translator rendered perfectly. "Why do you fear me, human?" The question stunned Daniel. Out of all the things she could have said, out of all the threats, orders, or condemnations she could have given, she asked that. He swallowed hard. Because I've heard stories of your people's strength, of the wars you've fought, of the way other species fear you. I didn't think I would survive this meeting." The queen tilted her head slightly, amber eyes narrowing as if considering his words carefully. Behind her, the warriors shifted uncomfortably, clearly expecting her to command his execution, but she did not. "Stories," she murmured almost to herself. Fear passed from mouth to mouth, shadow without light. Her gaze returned to him. "And yet, here you stand, trembling but not running. speaking, though your voice shakes. Daniel forced himself to straighten his shoulders, though fear still clung to him. Running wouldn't help, and silence would mean surrender. I'd rather speak and hope to be heard. For a moment, the forest was utterly silent again. The queen's expression was unreadable. Then slowly she raised a hand and her warriors lowered their weapons. Gasps of confusion echoed among them. "This human," she said firmly, her voice carrying the weight of command, "will not be harmed." Daniel blinked in shock. Relief flooded him, though caution held it back. He had not expected mercy. The queen took another step closer. She stood so near now that he could see the faint texture of her armor, like living stone fused with metal. Her voice softened, though it still carried strength. "You fear us because of what you have heard. But fear is a poor teacher. I will see for myself what a human truly is." The warrior stirred uneasily, but none dared challenge her. She turned to them with a commanding glance. "Bring him to the court. He is mine to question." Daniel's breath caught. He wanted to protest, to explain that he was just a researcher, not someone fit for courts or thrones. But the words died in his throat. He had no choice. As they escorted him deeper into the forest, Daniel couldn't stop replaying her question in his mind. "Why do you fear me, human?" It was not just a question of strength. It was a question of meaning, of perception, of truth. He did not yet realize it, but his answer had planted a seed, one that would change not only his life but the fate of two species. The deeper they went, the more the forest shifted into something alive and watchful. Towers of stone and crystal rose among the trees, glowing softly. Veyari warriors stood guard along pathways that seemed carved directly into the living earth. Daniel's fear still lingered, but alongside it came something new: curiosity. At last they entered the grand clearing that housed the queen's court. He felt as though he had stepped into a legend, and in the center of it all, the queen turned her gaze on him once again. "Human," she said, her voice echoing across the silent gathering. "You have spoken truth to me once, you will do so again." And with that, Daniel's journey truly began. The court of the Veyari queen was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It was not a hall of stone and brick like human palaces. Instead, it was a living space carved into the land itself. Giant trees with glowing roots bent into arches, forming natural pillars that reached higher than cathedral towers. Crystals jutted out from the ground like frozen rivers of light, and streams of silver water flowed quietly between them, casting reflections on the polished floor. Dozens of Veyari stood at the edges, silent and watchful. Each was armored in a natural shell that glimmered faintly under the strange glow of the court. They were not only warriors but advisors, elders, and emissaries. Their expressions ranged from distrust to outright hostility as they studied the lone human walking between them. Daniel kept his head slightly lowered, aware of every eye upon him. His boots echoed softly against the smooth surface beneath him, and though he tried to keep his step steady, his heart thumped unevenly. This was no place for an explorer with a data scanner and a satchel of soil samples. He felt small, out of place, and yet curiously determined. At the far end, the queen ascended a rise of crystal steps and sat upon a throne formed of fused stone and metal. It was less a chair and more a part of the earth itself, as though the planet had chosen to hold her there. She leaned forward slightly, resting one arm on the edge of the throne, her amber eyes never leaving him. The air grew heavier until Daniel realized the court was waiting for her to speak. Finally, Serenia, queen of the Veyari, broke the silence. "This human," she declared, her voice deep but sharp with command, "has crossed our boundary. By our laws, he should not stand here breathing. And yet, he spoke truth when I asked him. Few dare such a thing before me. For that reason, I hold his life in my hands, but I will not close them. Instead, I will ask." A murmur swept through the court. Daniel raised his head cautiously. The queen's gaze had not softened, but there was something in it, a glimmer, of curiosity that burned like a small flame. "You will answer me," Serenia continued, her voice carrying through the vast chamber. "Why do humans, weak of frame and short of years, persist among stars filled with predators stronger than you? Why have you not been consumed?" Daniel hesitated. The weight of her question pressed on him harder than her warriors' spears had. He felt as if his words might decide not only his fate but humanity's reputation. He took a slow breath, reminding himself that silence meant surrender. "We survive," he said, his voice steadying as he went on, "because we adapt. When storms rise, we build shelter. When hunger comes, we find new food. When we face enemies stronger than us, we don't always fight harder, we fight smarter. We look for a way they don't expect. Sometimes we endure when others break. That is why humans still live among the stars." The Queen studied him closely. The court murmured again, some voices rising in doubt, others in thought. One of the Feyari advisors, an elder with ridges across his brow, stepped forward angrily. "Deception. He speaks with clever tongue to hide his weakness. These creatures are prey, not rivals. We should end this charade before others see it as weakness." The Queen raised a hand, silencing him instantly. Her eyes never left Daniel. "Truth or deception, either way his words are new, and I will judge their weight, not you." The elder stepped back reluctantly, his glare fixed on Daniel. The hostility in the court had not lessened. If anything, Daniel felt the atmosphere grow sharper, as though every warrior present hoped for him to slip, to reveal cowardice or arrogance that would justify his end. But Serenia spoke again, her tone softer, though it carried just as much authority. "You say you adapt. Tell me, human, what of fear? Do you adapt to that as well? For even now I smell it upon you." Daniel's throat tightened. She was right. Fear pulsed through him, raw and heavy. His hands trembled slightly at his sides, and though he tried to steady them, he knew she could. "See, I don't deny it," he admitted, his voice low but honest. "Humans fear often. We fear storms, we fear the unknown, we fear losing those we care about. But fear doesn't always break us. Sometimes it pushes us. It makes us prepare. It makes us hold tighter to the things worth protecting. Fear can destroy, but it can also teach." The Queen leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing as if turning his words over like stones in her hand. The court fell into uneasy silence. For a moment, Daniel thought he had said too much. Then slowly, Serenia gave a faint nod. Strange words, human. Strange, and worth hearing. The tension eased slightly, though not entirely. The Queen rose from her throne and descended the crystal steps, her presence towering over him as she approached. The warriors stiffened, unsure of what she would do. Daniel felt his chest tighten again, his breath shallow, but he held his ground. When she stopped before him, she studied his face carefully. "Your voice trembles, yet your eyes do not lower. You fear, but you do not flee. This is unusual." Daniel forced himself to answer. "Maybe that is why I am here." Her lips curved slightly, not a smile but not displeasure either, more like a puzzle that intrigued her. She turned sharply to her guards. "He is not prey. He is mine to question. He will stay." Shock rippled through the court. Some of the warriors muttered angrily, others exchanged glances of disbelief, but none dared speak against her. Daniel's heart pounded. Stay? What did that mean? He wanted to ask, but the words caught in his throat. The Queen gestured for him to follow as she moved toward a side passage. 2 guards flanked him, their heavy steps echoing behind him. They walked through a long corridor of living crystal, its walls glowing faintly with inner light. At last, they entered a private chamber. It was quieter here, almost peaceful. Strange, plants grew in carved stone basins, and water trickled softly into a pool at the center. Serenia turned to face him again, her amber eyes glowing brighter in the dim light. Here you will answer me more, not before the court, but before me alone. I wish to know what humanity truly is. Daniel blinked. The queen of a powerful warrior race wanted to Understand humans? That was not what he expected. He thought he would be executed, or perhaps imprisoned. Instead, he was being questioned not like a prisoner, but like a mystery. He nodded slowly. I will answer, as best as I can. For the first time, he thought he saw the faintest glimmer of something softer in her eyes, curiosity, maybe even wonder. And Daniel realized something important. The Queen was not only testing him, she was also searching for something herself. What that was, he did not yet know, but it would change everything. For the next 2 days, Daniel was kept under close watch in the Queen's private quarters. He was not chained, but he was not free either. Guards stood at the entrance at all times, their glowing spears resting casually in their hands, though Daniel never doubted how quickly those weapons could be turned against him. The chamber was strange and beautiful. Tall crystals lined the walls, faintly humming with energy, and the floor was covered with dark polished stone that reflected light from glowing vines. A fountain of silver water trickled constantly, its sound soft and calming. It was a space that felt alive, as if the entire palace breathed. Each day, Queen Serenia returned to question him. She asked about Earth, about the way humans lived, about families, friendships, and the strange bonds that tied people together. She asked about war too, but not with the same hunger as her advisors. Her questions often paused on the small things: why humans laughed, why they sang, why they told stories. Daniel answered as best he could, speaking with honesty, even when his words revealed weakness. He noticed her eyes sometimes softened at his answers, though only for a moment before her expression returned to the calm strength of a ruler. But outside the Queen's chamber, unrest was growing. The Veyari court had never seen their queen show interest in an outsider before. Whispers filled the crystal halls, whispers that turned to arguments and arguments that turned to demands. The elders and war leaders pressed Serenia for a decision. A human had no place among them. At last, one morning, the Queen entered Daniel's chamber with her usual calm stride, but this time her expression carried a sharper edge. You have stirred my people, she said, her amber eyes locking on him. They see you as weakness, they call for your blood. Daniel swallowed. I expected as much. Her head tilted slightly at his calm reply. And yet you do not tremble as before. He offered a faint, tired smile. Maybe I'm getting used to fear. For a brief second, she almost looked amused. Then her voice hardened again. I cannot shield you forever. To silence their doubts, you must prove yourself. There will be a trial. Daniel's chest tightened. A trial? A test of endurance, Serenia explained. You will stand before my people and face what they demand. You cannot match our strength, but perhaps you will show another kind of power. If you fail, they will have their answer, and I will not stop them. If you succeed, her eyes narrowed slightly as though testing him, then you may remain under my protection. Daniel felt his stomach twist. The way she said, if you fail, left no doubt of what would happen. But deep down, he knew there was no choice. I'll face it, he said quietly. Her gaze lingered on him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. The following day, the trial was announced. Word spread quickly, and when Daniel was led into the great arena, thousands of Veyari had gathered. The arena was carved into the earth itself, a vast circle, surrounded by crystal pillars that glowed faintly under the morning sun. Warriors lined the edges, their armor gleaming, and common Veyari filled the stands. Daniel stood at the center, unarmed except for the simple gear he had carried since landing. His wrist scanner was gone, confiscated, leaving him with nothing but his mind and his will. Across the arena, 3 Veyari warriors stepped forward, towering and broad-shouldered. Their natural armor caught the light, making them appear as if forged from metal and stone. The Queen sat on a high platform, her throne overlooking the arena. She raised her hand, and silence fell. This human, she declared, her voice echoing across the stone, claims that his kind endures, that though fragile, they survive. Today, He will prove it. Or fall. The crowd rumbled with anticipation. The three warriors moved forward, circling Daniel like predators. Daniel's heart pounded, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. He knew he could not overpower them. If he tried to fight head-on, it would end in seconds. He had to think like a human. He had to adapt. The first warrior charged suddenly, spear raised. Daniel dived to the side, rolling across the dirt. The spear slammed into the ground where he had stood, cracking the stone. Daniel scrambled to his feet, already moving again. The crowd hissed with disappointment, some laughing at the human's desperate dodge. But Serenya's eyes never left him. The second warrior swung a heavy blade downward. Daniel ducked behind one of the arena's broken crystal spires. The blade cleaved into it, sending shards scattering. Daniel grabbed one of the shards, a jagged piece the size of his hand, crude but sharp. He darted away as the third warrior lunged. The shard was not enough to harm them fatally, but it gave him something. A tool. A chance. Minutes stretched into long, breathless exchanges. Daniel could not attack directly, but he used the arena itself, forcing the warriors to strike at stone, pillars, and heavy blocks. Dust filled the air as their blows shattered the ground, and slowly they grew frustrated. Their attacks were powerful but predictable. Daniel's body ached, his breath came ragged, and sweat poured down his face. Every muscle screamed at him to stop, but he kept moving, dodging, tricking them into overextending. He used fear itself to keep going. Fear of stopping, fear of falling, fear of losing the chance to live. At last, an opening came. One warrior swung wide, smashing through a crystal column. Daniel darted forward and slammed his shard into the warrior's unprotected joint. It was not a deep wound, but enough to stagger the giant. The crowd gasped. The other two turned on him with fury. Daniel backed away quickly, his chest burning, his body on the edge of collapse. But in that moment, the trial was no longer one-sided. He had shown them weakness could strike strength. The queen rose slowly from her throne, raising her hand. The warriors froze mid-stride, halting at her command. The crowd fell silent. Daniel collapsed to one knee, chest heaving, the shard falling from his trembling hand. He had nothing left to give. Yet he was still alive, still standing. Serenya's voice carried through the arena, calm but edged with authority. He has endured, not with force but with will, not with strength but with cunning. Let it be known, this human is not prey. The crowd erupted with mixed cries, some angry, some amazed, some unwilling but unable to deny what they had seen. Daniel lifted his head weakly, meeting the queen's gaze. For a brief moment he saw something in her eyes, pride perhaps, or something deeper that she did not show to anyone else. Guards moved to escort him back, but Serenya raised her hand again. No, he walks with me. And so, bruised and battered, Daniel followed her out of the arena. Every step was agony, but his heart felt strangely light. He had faced the impossible and survived, and though he did not yet know it, the trial had changed more than his fate. It had changed the way Serenya saw him. The trial had left Daniel's body sore and bruised, but it had also shifted the way the Veeri looked at him. No longer did they whisper only of weakness and fragility. Now they spoke in puzzled tones about the human who had endured their warrior, test, and lived. Some still laughed at his small stature and trembling frame, but the laughter no longer carried the same sharp certainty. Doubt had crept in, and doubt among the Veeri was the first crack in a wall of pride. Daniel, however, was less concerned with whispers than with the quiet silence that had fallen between him and the queen after the trial. Serenya had spoken before the crowd with authority, declaring him not prey, but since then she had retreated into a strange calm. She summoned him each day to her private chambers, but the questions she once asked so often were fewer now. Instead, of curiosity about Earth and humanity, she seemed lost in thought, her amber eyes fixed on him in long silences that made his heart pound. One evening, after a long day of rest and healing, Daniel was summoned again. The chamber was lit only by the soft glow of the crystal walls. Shadows danced gently and the trickle of water echoed like a whisper. Serenia stood near the pool at the center, her reflection rippling with the water. Daniel stepped forward cautiously. "You wanted to see me?" She turned, her eyes shining, faintly in the dim light. For a moment she did not speak. Then, with a voice softer than he had ever heard from her, she asked the same question that had begun their strange connection. "Why do you fear me, human?" The sound of it struck him harder than any blow in the arena. He remembered that first meeting in the forest, the ring of warriors around him, her voice like thunder asking the same words. Then he had spoken of stories, rumors of Veyari cruelty, of their strength and power. He had spoken of survival, of fear of death. But now, standing before her, he knew that answer was no longer enough. Something had changed. He had changed. Daniel drew a slow breath. His body still ached, but his mind was clear. He looked into her eyes, unflinching. "I don't fear you for your power anymore. Not your strength, not your warriors, not the stories I heard before I came here." Her head tilted slightly, her gaze sharpening. "Then why?" His throat tightened. Words pressed inside him, heavy, but true. "I fear you because you can change me." The chamber went utterly still. The guards outside could not hear. The water trickled on, but between them silence wrapped tightly. Serenia's eyes narrowed. "Change you? How?" Daniel's voice grew steadier as he spoke. "Because when I stand before you, I don't feel like a stranger among giants. I don't feel only human, fragile, and small. I feel like I could belong here, even in a world that isn't mine. That thought frightens me more than any weapon." Her breath caught faintly. It was almost invisible, but Daniel noticed. The queen of the Veyari, feared across the galaxy, faltered for a moment. "You fear being bound," she murmured, "not by chains, but by me." Daniel nodded. "Yes. Because you are not just a ruler to your people. To me, you've become something more. And that terrifies me, because it means I no longer know where I truly belong." For the first time since meeting her, Serenia looked away. She turned her gaze to the pool where her reflection shimmered. A queen who had faced countless battles, who had silenced entire councils with a word, now stood in quiet thought. Her voice, when it came, was softer still. "All my life I have been feared. My enemies feared me because of my strength. My people feared me because of my judgment. Even those closest to me kept their distance. But you..." She turned her gaze back to him, her amber eyes glowing not with power but with something uncertain. "You fear me not for what I am, but for what you see in me. That is... new." Daniel swallowed hard, his heart pounding. He had not expected her to reveal such words, words that felt almost vulnerable. She stepped closer. The faint glow of the chamber reflected on her armor, and for a moment Daniel saw not only the queen but the woman beneath, the one who had lived behind the weight of fear her entire life. "You have spoken truth again," she said quietly, "and truth carries weight, perhaps more than strength itself." Their eyes locked, and the silence between them was no longer heavy with dread but with something fragile, something unspoken. At last, Serenia turned away, though her voice carried warmth Daniel had never heard before. "Rest now. Tomorrow the council will speak and I will need strength. But know this, human, your answer has not only changed you, it has changed me." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "Then I am glad I spoke it." She did not reply, but as he was escorted back to his chamber, he knew something had shifted. Not in the way the court viewed him, not even in the way the queen judged him as a leader. No, it was something deeper, something between them. That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the glowing ceiling. His body was still tired, but his mind was alive with thought. He had not lied. He truly feared her. Not her weapons or her power, but the way she made him feel less like a wandering stranger and more like someone who could belong. And though, It frightened him. It also gave him hope. What he did not know was that Serenia, in her private silence, sat awake as well, her hand resting lightly on the surface of the water pool, watching the ripples spread. She had ruled with iron strength for years, had commanded armies and crushed rebellions, but no single battle had ever unsettled her as much as the simple words of a human. "I fear you because you can change me." She whispered the words into the quiet chamber, and for the first time in many years, she felt the weight of her crown in a different way, not as a burden of command, but as a question of what it meant to be truly seen. And in that moment, the Queen of the Veyari realized that her world, too, was no longer the same. The morning sun streamed through the high crystal windows of the palace, painting the walls with golden light. Daniel awoke feeling a strange sense of calm. His body still carried the bruises and aches from the trials and confrontations of the past weeks, yet his mind was sharper than ever. He could hear the faint hum of the palace beyond his chamber, the footsteps of guards and courtiers going about their duties. But today was different. He knew it in the marrow of his bones. Serenia had summoned him early, not for judgment, not for a test, but for something neither of them had dared to speak aloud until now. He dressed quickly, the simple uniform of a human envoy feeling foreign yet fitting on his frame. As he approached the Queen's chambers, his heartbeat quickened. He could not say why exactly. It was not fear, not exactly, but a tension, a thrill, a quiet expectation. The doors slid open before he could knock, as they always did for him now. Serenia stood by the balcony, looking out over the city below. The towers gleamed like silver, and the citizens moved in their daily routines, oblivious to the moment that was about to change their world, even if slightly. "Good morning, human," Serenia said without turning. Her voice carried its usual calm authority, but there was a softness beneath it that Daniel had never heard from her before. "Good morning, Your Majesty," Daniel replied, bowing slightly. She finally turned to face him. Her amber eyes met his, and for the first time he felt no distance between them. The air seemed to hum with unspoken words, with the potential of things neither of them could yet name. "You have been patient," she said. "Patient and brave. I have watched you grow stronger in ways I did not expect. Not just in skill, not just in endurance, but in thought and understanding. You see the world differently than any Veyari." "I have known." Daniel swallowed, unsure how to respond. Compliments from a queen were rare, and from Serenia rarer still. "I only tried to survive," he said, then added, "and to understand." She took a step closer. "Survival is instinct. Understanding, that is choice. And that choice is what has set you apart." Daniel's eyes followed her movement. She was a queen, a warrior, a being of immense power and authority, yet now she seemed almost human, her voice gentle, her gaze searching. And he realized, as if struck by a sudden revelation, that this was the first time he had truly seen her as she was, not just as a ruler or a challenge, but as a being with her own doubts, her own hopes, her own capacity for change. Daniel began, then paused. Words that had been caught in his throat for weeks now surfaced. "I never thought I would find someone like you in this galaxy, someone who could make me question what I am, what I'm capable of, and yet, here you are." Serenia's expression softened. For a fleeting moment, her usual regal composure gave way to something more personal, more vulnerable. "And yet I have found someone who is different. You do not fear me in the same way others do. You respect strength, but you do not bow to it blindly. You see me, Daniel. Not just the queen, not just the warrior, but me." Daniel stepped forward, the words that had been trapped inside him spilling out. "I see you, Serenia, and that terrifies me sometimes, because it makes me feel something I never expected. Something more than survival, more than duty. I feel connection, and I don't know if I am ready for it, but I cannot deny it." The queen remained silent, but her gaze did not waver. She took another step closer, reducing the space between them. Daniel could feel the warmth of her presence, the quiet force of her being that had always intimidated him now feeling intimate, personal, almost inviting. "Connection," Serenia said slowly. "Yes, I understand. And perhaps that is why I called you here. Not to test your strength, not to demand loyalty or obedience. I called you here because I want honesty, because I want you to know that the fear you spoke of is not yours alone. I too have feared change, feared trust, feared the unknown. And yet, I see it in you. I see it, and I no longer want to hide from it." Daniel's breath caught. The Queen, the most powerful being he had ever encountered, spoke of fear as if it were something ordinary, something he could understand, and in that moment, the wall between them seemed to crumble, replaced by a fragile bridge of truth and shared humanity. I don't know what to say," Daniel admitted. "I have never experienced anything like this. I have never met someone who sees me and doesn't try to break me. You see me and you might trust me. That is a gift I cannot take lightly." Serenia tilted her head, studying him. "And I cannot take lightly the choice I must make now. The choice to see beyond duty, beyond expectation, beyond the role I am bound to play as queen. I have lived all my life in chains I cannot always see. Chains of responsibility, chains of power, chains of fear. And now I see the possibility of something different. Something human." Daniel stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then perhaps and we can find that together, step by step, not as ruler and subject, not as alien and human, but as two beings who have survived, who have learned, and who choose to trust." For a long moment, Serenia said nothing. Then she extended her hand, not as a queen to a subject, not as a warrior to a challenger, but simply as herself. Daniel took it, feeling the warmth, the strength, and the sincerity in that touch. "You are brave, human," she said softly. "Braver than you know. Braver than I have allowed myself to believe." "And you are?" Daniel began, then paused, searching for words that would not be swallowed by formality or fear. "You are the reason I feel like I can be brave. You are the reason I can see possibilities I never imagined." Serenia's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. It was rare, precious, fleeting. "Then perhaps," she said, "we have both changed. Perhaps fear is not the measure of strength, but the acknowledgement of possibility. And perhaps that is how we begin." Daniel nodded, understanding the depth of her words. Fear had brought them together, yes, but honesty, trust, and choice would be what bound them. They were no longer adversaries, no longer test subjects in a game of power. They were two beings who had seen each other fully, and in doing so had discovered courage and connection beyond expectation. The sun rose higher, flooding the chamber with light. Daniel and Serenia stood side by side, not as ruler and human, not as alien and visitor, but as equals in a moment of quiet understanding. The city below bustled with life, unaware of the bond that had just been forged above them. Yet in that quiet chamber, in the shared space between warrior and human, something extraordinary had begun. Days passed, and their interactions changed. The council noticed the subtle shift. The human was no longer timid, no longer reactive. He moved with confidence, not from arrogance, but from understanding. Serenia's decisions reflected a new clarity, informed not only by her strength and wisdom, but by the perspectives Daniel brought. Together they began to navigate challenges, not as teacher and pupil, but as partners, learning and adapting together. One evening, after a long day of discussion and planning, Serenia invited Daniel to the palace gardens. The soft glow of bioluminescent plants lit the paths, casting gentle shadows. The air was fragrant with alien flowers, and the sound of distant waterfalls filled the space with calm. "You have changed this world, human," she said, her voice carrying quiet admiration. "Not with weapons or command, but with perspective. You have reminded me of something I almost forgot, that strength is not only in power, but in understanding. in trust, in courage to be seen fully. Daniel looked at her, feeling a swell of emotion. "And you have changed me, Serenia. You have shown me that courage is more than endurance, that bravery is more than survival. It is honesty, it is connection, it is choosing to see and be seen." Serenia nodded, and for the first time, she reached out and gently touched his shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it carried more weight than any battle or decree. "Then let us see together, human. Let us face what comes, not with fear, but with choice. And perhaps in that choice, we will find more than victory. We will find something worth holding on to." Daniel smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. "I think I already have." And in the soft glow of the gardens, with the city alive below and the stars beginning to twinkle above, the human and the Veyari queen stood together, not bound by fear, not bound by expectation, but bound by understanding, courage, and a trust that had grown from the simplest of truths, to see each other fully without pretend.